A notorious prison lies smack in the heart of Kuala Lumpur.
Pudu Jail was a time bomb when I was there.
Once home to killers, rapists, and heroes.
A prisoner only loses his right of freedom of movement. In all other things, he's entitled.
To some, it was sacred. To others, it was hell.
Bila buka tali tu, bunyi.
Enter the realm of lost souls, beyond Bars Pudu Jail. Kuala Lumpur is a city that likes to look forward to the future. But in June 2010, more than 1,000 people gather in central Kuala Lumpur to protest against the demolition of a 100-year-old city landmark. Their cause is not palace nor temple, but the dark and forbidding Pudu Jail.
I still don't know the stories behind these walls. So I guess the only way for us to appreciate these stories is by taking care of this building. Don't demolish it. You should take care of it, take it like a heritage building. And I guess the future generation could learn a lot more.
Pada saya tak perlu dirobohkan kerana di Kuala Lumpur ni kita kekurangan bangunan bersejarah.
Everybody was waiting because the excavators were there. The big machines were about to knock down the wall, and when it did, there was this big gasp from everyone.
For others, the old dilapidated jail no longer has a place in the center of this vibrant, prosperous city.
Rasa memang patut kena roboh sebab apa? Dia kat tengah-tengah kota, jadi lagipun bangunan dia tak nampak tak apa-apa cantik lagi dah kan. Tak ada pemeliharaan. Jadi rasa patut dirobohkan untuk pembangunan yang bagi peluang kepada pembangunan yang lain.
As a proud Malaysian, I don't know how a prison represents my heritage and culture. The less the prison is, the more my people are safe.
Gangster Tan Alek spent 5 years locked up behind these looming walls before going straight. For him, Pudu is a concrete symbol of redemption and should be preserved to warn future generations that crime doesn't pay.
金逢係一個臭地方，話唔好啊，但係歷史咁多年，啱冇可以感化到人㗎，唔應該拆㗎。
Former prison officer Nur Shahid believes just as strongly that the infamous jail must be saved.
It is a heritage building. It was built 115 years ago. So I think that part of it should be preserved, just to remind people that Pudu Jail once stood here. You see, that is important for future generations to see.
Pudu Prison has been an integral part of the history of Kuala Lumpur for more than 100 years. A big bustling city today, Kuala Lumpur started as a collection of humble dwellings at the confluence of two rivers. Here, thousands of impoverished Chinese men struggled to make their fortunes in muddy, disease-ridden jungle swamps. Then Kuala Lumpur was a frontier town, a lawless place where rival gangs fought each other to gain control of gambling dens. When they died, the inhabitants of old Kuala Lumpur, including the victims of these vicious gang wars, ended up in vast burial grounds built on the edge of town. It was on top of one of these burial grounds that the British resolved to build a mighty prison to impose their will on the lawless gangs.
It was built 115 years ago in a jungle. Pudu was a jungle at that time, you see, and Kuala Lumpur was Batu Road. So they said that tigers were roaming around there in those days, you see, it was 100 over years ago.
Construction began in 1891 using materials brought from all over the British Empire. After 4 years of hard convict labor, Pudu Jail loomed above the swampy ground of the old cemetery.
Look at me, Pudu Jail. I'm a statement building too, you know. If you do something bad, boy, you're just gonna go behind there, you know. Whoever is in power makes statement buildings. Look at the KLCC, you know, the Twin Towers. You look at Shanghai, you look at any country in the world. At any period of time, there are statement buildings.
Pudu became a brooding symbol of British power and its harsh system of justice. Death stalked the new prison from the very start. In August 1895, an outbreak of cholera sweeps through the jail. Pudu was quarantined. Prisoners languished in the cells, their bodies ravaged by lethal bacteria. The epidemic seemed unstoppable. Hundreds died, horribly. The prison governor had to find the source of infection. It was the prison surgeon, E.A.O. Travers, who eventually worked out why Pudu had become a death trap for its inmates. Travers realized that the solution must have something to do with the prison's water supply, so he traced it back to its source, an old well that tapped straight into the old Chinese cemetery beneath the prison. It brimmed with deadly bacteria. But it still took 3 years to stem the outbreak. And it seems that the restless dead have never let the residents of Pudu Jail, neither prisoners nor warders, forget their presence.
I heard the story of a female flying ghost going around, you see, from cell looking at them and whatnot at night.
總言之，嗰啲人哋講嗰啲幽靈嗰啲啊，喺入邊死啊，你離開唔到布都知噶嘛。如果喺入邊上吊嘅，喺入邊打交死嘅，因為本身班由日本仔嘅時候，好多人喺入邊死噶嘛。
Since it was built, thousands of prisoners have been incarcerated inside Pudu prison. They had committed every imaginable kind of crime, but for every prisoner, each day began with the same ominous sound as their cell doors are unlocked. For more than a century, Malaysia's most wanted wrongdoers were locked up in Pudu Jail in the center of Kuala Lumpur. Inside, every inmate was treated equally. The prison made no distinction between races and classes.
There is no special classification according to crimes here in Pudu Jail. All prisoners that come from Selangor are housed here, whether they are robbers or murderers or rapists or kidnappers, they are all put in Pudu Jail.
For the prisoners and warders alike, the day began before dawn. Outside, traders at the nearby wet market have long been awake. School children and the first wave of workers were starting another normal day. Only the fetid smells wafting from the prison canteen reminded ordinary citizens of a very different world hidden behind the concrete walls of Pudu Jail. Inside, prison life had its own unique rhythm. It began noisily at 7 o'clock with the cacophonous sound of 600 padlocks being unlocked and cell doors thrown open. Every warder on duty was responsible for maintaining order on a single wing of 50 cells, each one containing at least 6 prisoners.
Mula-mula daripada pukul 7 tu, dia orang buka bilik dia orang buang najis. Najis dia orang punya najis lah. Satu dulu pakai tong, pakai ni apa kan. Dia orang sendiri buang. Dah habis sendiri buang, dia masuk balik bilik, masuk tong apa belakang pukul 8 dia orang keluar lah. Dia orang keluar, datang ini macam orang yang cook house punya bagi makan punya, datang bagi makan lah. Pukul 8 dia orang makan lah. Makan, bagi orang salah makan pukul 8 tu. Sampai pukul 9 itu, habislah makan dia orang. Makan dia orang habis bekerja lah. Tengoklah kerja apa kerja dia orang. Ada yang buat tukang kasut, ada yang buat ini tukang kayu, ada yang buat tukang jahit.
Inside this pressure cooker world, fights exploded frequently, usually without warning. For inmates, fighting was a matter of honor, and sides had to be taken. Life was cheap. Grudges were never forgiven.
因為我哋喺黑社會出嚟，有時人哋講：妖你咩大哥，大哥又點？係咪先？有時嗰啖氣吞唔落噶嘛，一吞唔落就咩咯，就打交咯，你免不了嘅。如果係愛嘅，即係如果係心唔服嚟講，即係下晝嗰條你入嚟我房咯。
Many of the inmates were hard-bitten gangsters and triad gang members. They had no intention of making peace with old enemies, who had also ended up inside Pudu. Many of the bloody fights that erupted between prisoners were unfinished gang wars.
嗰陣時，即係因為本身有經費嘛，你一班咁啊嘛，一班即係把生嘅同哥唔波噶嘛，攞刀仔出嚟，一班打到總之好亂啊，打死好多擺咗咯入邊，10幾個打過咩唔死，梗死噶嘛，你唔係李小龍啊。
Even for prisoners unconnected to gangs inside or outside the jail, violence was hard to escape. Just about anything could be turned to use as a weapon.
Zaman dulu zaman saya dulu lah. Kalau bergaduh memang ada lah kan. Memang dia kalau gaduh main tikam lah. Main pasal dia banyak game fight. Pasal dia banyak kumpulan. Yalah satu bilik pun mau 5-16 orang. Satu bilik tu 16 orang sekali turun datang. Tak mati yang seorang tu. Matilah kalau tak. Yang pakai bugi, yang pakai apa macam-macam lah. Yang pakai batu-batu pun ada.
For some prisoners who have been pushed to the limit, there was only one final way out.
好似你上吊都好啊，你腳喺地下都會死噶嘛。好多企住個門嚟吊啊。
Even a toughened career criminal like Tana Lek succumbed to despair.
啲毛巾爬上個窗口嗰度綁住你吊，爬上嘅嘛。因為我哋個床差唔多即係你一壓啊咁樣就跳上個窗口度，鐵枝你一下揸到啊嘛。咁你人揸到鐵枝咪爬上去啦，綁咗個棘咁樣，我吊嘅時候用乜嘢？咁我吊唔成嘛。 因為即係嗰陣時即係好低落嘅時候啊，冇諗咁多啊，諗到監期仲有成7年，有冇點樣嚟過啲日子？
The prison authorities could not predict when an inmate might crack. Warder Abdul Manap spent 30 years working in Pudu. He remembers one incident when a prisoner working as a cobbler in the prison workshop unexpectedly went berserk.
Tengok ni ha, ni. Yang baling pisau. Dia dendam dengan pakcik ke apa kan. Dia tak dapat nak apa pakcik, dia baling dengan pisau.
Faced with violent daily confrontations, the warders had one final sanction: the solitary confinement cell. Prisoners called a spell of solitary confinement, going to Genting Highlands, referring to a hill resort just outside Kuala Lumpur. But of course, it was no holiday. The solitary confinement cell was tiny, dark, and putrid. Time locked away in here could undermine the mental state of even the hardest men. Prisoners condemned to solitary confinement received only bread and water, which was torture for Asian men used to daily portions of rice.
Kata makan roti 14 hari ke. Itu kena tak boleh campur kan. Makan roti ni kita badan lemah. Ya kita tak pernah makan roti. Makan roti kira tak ada nasi, tak ada air, tak ada air kopi, tak ada apalah, tak ada kanji, tak ada apa. Makan roti dengan air sejuk.
Only the toughest of the tough, the Pudu elite, could hope to withstand this sanity-sapping regime. Whenever they could, Pudu inmates pursued their criminal careers as they did outside, even secretly making weapons inside the prison.
因為入邊有鐵廠嘛，有鐵廠可以自己攞嚟磨咯，自己喺房間磨啊，攞啲藤啊，劈到尖尖嘅，嗰啲牙刷啊，拉尾嗰度攞嚟磨尖尖嘅咯。梗如果係咁，好傷噶啦，梗係滿身窿噶啦。
When you're inside, desperation is the mother of invention, and Pudu prisoners had plenty of time to dream up new ideas. Longing for a taste of something sweeter than the daily rations of rice or bread, some even worked out a way of baking delicious cakes.
Macam kek pisang, kek nanas, kek apa semua dah biasalah. Ni kita pergi ke kek sekali-sekali time hari cuti special for hours lah. Jadi time hari perjumpaan tu dapatlah Milo. Jadi Milo, gula, jadi ada kelebihan sikit. Jadi masa itulah kita gunakan kelebihan tu. Roti kita simpan sebelum nak mula kita kena jemur dulu. Apabila pagi dapat roti ration, pagi dapat kita kumpul dulu. Kumpul petang agak tunggu masuk bilik baru kita uli dia. Dia dah kering sikit. Apabila dah kering senang. Dia dah kering kita pergi buat macam ni. Jadi okeylah sampai dia dah betul-betul dah kering jadi tepung balik.
The prison chefs used simple apparatus found in every cell, plus some help from Mother Nature.
Tahu plastik kat gayung tu macam tadi, tahu roti tu semua uli dia. Jadi dah tentu kita angkat plastik tu cantik. Jadi letak kat tinggi sikit. Atas angin lubang angin, letak atas. Letak dengan pasir plastik tu sendiri. Tak ada semut, tak ada apa kan. Letak je tu. Jadi angin ni kena dia keras. Apabila dia keras, dia dah jadi macam biskuit. Kita potong cantik rangup.
Officially, the prisoners' day ended at 10 o'clock when the warders locked up the inmates in their cells for the night. To add spice to such tedious daily routines, some warders competed to see who could get the job done quickest. The record time was 5 minutes for 50 cells. As night fell over Kuala Lumpur and Pudu Jail, people rushed home or crammed into cafes and restaurants. Life didn't stop inside Pudu either. Night was the time to make secret deals. It was called the Hour of the Shooters.
Kita buat satu macam sumpit tu. Macam sumpit kita taruh lah barang-barang apa yang kita taruh kertas ke, taruh apa ke. Kadang-kadang pun taruh abuk juga lah. Sementara tu sambil nyelam minum air lah konon ni. Ada yang pakai tali, yang sambung ke tali lah. Bila kalau tak sampai kita boleh tarik balik tali tu balik. Boleh tarik balik tali, kita tembak ke sekali. Kadang-kadang kita kalau tak sampai juga, kita panggil yang bilik depan pula, pancing ke depan pula. Pancing main pas-pas lah. Sana ke sana, sana ke sana.
For many prisoners, as the cell door slammed shut and night fell, there were tantalizing reminders of a life outside.
即係半夜嘅時候啊，半夜啊聞到傾傾鏗鏗呢個建造行嗰度啊，聞到啊嘛福建面，夜晚啲風吹到嚟，聞到啊嘛，唔知幾時有得食咯。好近啫嘛，但係我等個時間好耐嘛。
For prisoners like Tan, there was always hope for a better life once they had served their time inside. But there were others who never left Pudu Jail alive. These were the prisoners on death row, awaiting their appointment with the Pudu hangman. Pudu Prison, in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, hidden away inside the prison, is death row. Empty today, these were once the cells of the damned. One of the most infamous death row inmates was Botak Chin. A born rebel, Chin was impatient to get it over with.
Dia ingat itu jam jatuh hukum itu jangan gantung. Mana gantung? Boleh lama gantung. Baru jadi. Sampai disiram pakcik dengan air kencing lah. Botak Chin. Syat betul Botak Chin. Dia marah pakcik tak mau jadi postman lah. Dia pasal dia marah tu lah.
Botak Chin played the hard man all his life. But when he was finally led into the execution chamber, he flinched.
Mana Botak Chin ada steady kong. Naik pergi gantung pun. Kong hai semua tu stun je lah.
The death row prisoners dreaded Thursday mornings. That was when an officer read out the list of prisoners to be executed the next day.
Mereka hanya mula gelisah pada hari Rabu. Kita tahu kenapa? Sebab hari Khamis adalah hari pengisytiharan hukuman akan dibaca. Artinya kalau hari Khamis itu ada panggilan, berarti panggilan itu untuk menentukan yang akan digantung pada hari Jumaat.
Normally, 3 hangings were scheduled to take place every Friday. Those who did not make it onto the dreaded Thursday list had another week to live. Abdul Rashid was Pudu's religious counselor. His task was to prepare inmates for the end.
Kalau dia kalah, dia masuk bilik gantung. Pudu lah. Jadi selama saya duduk dalam penjara tu, saya dah tengok 30 lebih lah. Mula dia gantung 3, lepas tu bilik gantung tu dah getak, dia bagi 2, sampai 94.
Pas sekali lah. Dia pas sekali. Mui koloi bai sam ko.
The relentless toll of executions filled other prisoners with dread.
聽得多都麻木噶嘛，因為我哋喺入邊，我諗法另外一種噶喎，另外一邊啫嘛，人生始終一死噶嘛，咁你今日你犯咗罪，你入到嚟呢度，冇話你講你行運啊嘛，啱冇？你犯到嗰條 law 可以死嘅，冇得講行運嘅。
Prisoners on death row dealt with their fate in different ways. Some were resigned, but others had to be dragged screaming into the execution chamber. Or in the case of communist prisoners, singing. Many of these showed their defiance to the end, striking up the red flag as warders marched them to the execution chamber.
Remember when we hang the 2 condemned prisoners who shot the chief police officer of Perak. He went out singing.
It was a sound familiar to other prisoners.
呢個有時嗰啲bilik gantung啊，嗰啲人唱歌打鑼鼓都唔停嘅。即係到我吊人嘅時候，每一日我吊人嘅時候，即係每一個禮拜我吊人嘅時候，嗰度唱歌唱到唔停㗎啦。
When Malaysia was gripped by communist insurgencies in the 1980s, singing was often heard on Pudu's death row.
Ramai dia menyanyi tu. Sampai kita dengar kalau dia nak gantung dia menyanyi. Nyanyi semua orang menyanyi lah.
Put a noose around his neck. He was still singing, and he went down singing. So, I think that singing gives him the courage.
For Counselor Abdul Rashid, consoling death row prisoners was always traumatic.
Saya pada pengalaman pertama hukuman gantung pada 17/11/72. Malam subuh tu gantung dan malam berikut tu memang saya bila tidur saya nampak tali gantung depan saya.
Many death row inmates had to wait months or even years for their sentence to be carried out. Waiting was a kind of torture.
Dia lagi reda. Dia ingat dia orang ni kalau boleh itu jangan jatuh hukum tu jangan gantung. Dia lagi senang. Dia tak tunggu tu dia punya penderitaan tu. Macam nak nunggu tu. Kita nak gantungan. Nak nunggu sampai bertahun-tahun pula. Duduk pula dah dalam bilik aja.
Menunggu ni suatu penyiksaan. So, kalau dah laksana hukuman, pada dia, itu adalah lebih baik pada dia daripada menunggu berminggu-minggu, berbulan-bulan, bertahun-tahun. Ya. Dan ini boleh menjadikan dia gila. Kalau tak dibantu.
There was no counseling for the men charged with carrying out the executions. They had to be a special breed to properly carry out the rituals of the death chamber. Whenever a hanging was scheduled, a pungent odor heralded the arrival of the executioner.
Sebelum pelaksanaan hukum gantung itu dilakukan, biasanya memang adalah beberapa tanda. Misalnya bau kapur barus. Itu pun tidak semua orang cium. Selalunya pegawai yang jaga malam tercium ada semacam bau kapur barus. Itu kapur barus. Biasa digunakan untuk mandikan mayat.
Pudu's executioners were hand-picked and had to complete a rigorous training program in Glasgow, Scotland. In the world of the Pudu prison, they were the ultimate professionals. Warders who served longest on death row came to regard it as just another job.
Ya, pasti kalau masa hukum gantung tu, pasti ada jaga situ. Pasti sampailah gantung tu. Tolong ni orang yang tukang gantung ni, dia pukul 6 dah sampai dah. Dah sampai dia nak gantung orang tu kan. Belakang nak pasang gari orang tu. Kadang tu ada yang melawan.
The apparatus used in the death chamber was also inherited from the British. Nooses were hand-woven in England. A noose was good only for 3 executions, then it was discarded. The best hangmen prided themselves on getting the job done quickly.
Gantung dia tadi tu ada besi yang ada besi tembaga sini kan. Dia gantung sarung cerat itu. Tu dia buka ni macam ni terbuka tu kan. Orang gini belakang benda tu terbuka ni kan. Pow gitu. Ada gear tu.
The most expert executioners could extinguish a life in just 10 seconds.
Turun tu buka lah apa jerat kepala tu buka. Tu juga betul kadang-kadang tu kalau orang tak biasa peranjat dia buka tu dia berbunyi tau. Angin tu keluar. Dia dah kena tu muka ni hitam dan lebam.
The terrible sound of Pudu's death machine reminded prisoners listening from other wings of the ultimate punishment. Among former inmates of Pudu Jail, there is a special elite, a tiny handful of former death row inmates who escaped the hangman's brass-ringed noose. One is Bangkok. In 1984, he was sentenced to death for drug trafficking.
Awak ni kap, suatu hari nanti dia kata awak akan dibawa ke satu tempat. Di situ awak akan menjalani hukuman gantung sampai mati. Di situ baru kita rasa lah, kita rasa lah dia sejuk ke kepanasan dia, baru kita rasa dalam mahkamah tinggi tu.
Week after week, month after month, Bangkok listened to the death machine at work and wondered when his turn to meet the hangman would come. Death seemed inevitable, but in Malaysia, the king can grant pardons to some prisoners, and Bangkok was lucky, very lucky. Now he's serving out a life sentence in another jail. Both prisoners and their warders avoided discussing death row. It was a forgotten, secretive world. But it was the desperate actions of a death row inmate called Jimmy Chua that would remind the Malaysian public of the existence of Pudu's death row and set in motion the decline and fall of the old prison. The long, hot summer of 1986, Pudu was a human pressure cooker about to explode.
Pudu Jail was a time bomb when I was there in 1978 to 1981. It was very crowded. Imagine the prison was built for 600 prisoners, but at that time we had more than 5,000 prisoners.
Cells designed for one man are crammed with 10 or more prisoners. Every warder must oversee at least 300 men. It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Thousands of prisoners, many of them hardcore criminals, squashed in appalling conditions, with time on their hands and little oversight. Inevitably, the pressure cooker burst. The crisis began when death row inmate Jimmy Chua hatched a plan to break out of the hellhole of Pudu Jail. On Monday, October 17, 1986, Chua and 5 other prisoners seized prison doctor Radzi Jafar and Abdul Aziz, a medical assistant in the prison infirmary. Chua demanded that the prison authorities release him and his gang, and the hostages go free. The kidnappers wanted access to a helicopter to fly them to freedom, but the prison governor rejected their demands.
As Director General, I will never let them go out. I'm going to kill them. I'll shoot them in the car.
Pudu Jail was now in lockdown.
Dia ada curfew seminggu, tak boleh turun, kena buang tong aja, mandi tak ada, apa tak ada. Suasana kelang kabut lah, jadi kacau bilau.
One long-term inmate knew that Chua had no chance of getting out. The atmosphere inside the besieged infirmary was explosive. By now, plans to use special forces, the UTK, to break the siege were well advanced. They would go in fighting, but then Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad was briefed about the plan to end the siege. It was the biggest news story in Malaysia. Mahathir feared the political fallout if there was bloodshed.
Dr. Mahathir was a bit concerned about the solutions. I think his word was, if it can be avoided, let there be no bloodshed.
After getting new orders to show restraint, the plans changed, and so did the weapons.
By getting them a rattan stick, the big one, you know.
But how would the UTK unit get inside the infirmary without using violence? It was the prison governor, Dato Ibrahim, who found a solution. He had begun secret negotiations with one of Chua's gang, who promised to let the authorities know when the criminal kingpin's guard was down. Then, on day 6 of the siege, Ibrahim received a dramatic call from the infirmary.
These chaps said, Datuk, you come now. I will open the gate.
The UTK men burst through the unlocked door into the infirmary and took down Chua's gang with their canes. After 140 hours under siege, Dr. Radzi and Abdul Aziz were released unharmed. For the authorities, the end of the siege was a great success. Chua and his men were disarmed without bloodshed. Under pressure from the Prime Minister, the authorities began to improve conditions inside Pudu Jail. But ringleader Jimmy Chua had little time to appreciate the new, improved Pudu. He was returned to death row and hung, the 108th inmate to die on the gallows inside Pudu prison. In the aftermath of the hostage crisis, there was intense debate about the future of the old jail. When the dust settled, it was clear that Pudu's days as a working prison were numbered. The Malaysian authorities focused their resources on modern, up-to-date prisons. Today, the brooding concrete slab of Pudu stands forlorn and empty. Its only inmates now are, some say, the spirits of prisoners long dead.
Menurut kepercayaan orang Melayu, rumah yang dibiar kosong selama 40 hari akan didiami oleh jin.
Malaysia's ghost hunter, Syed Abdullah, has long wanted to investigate Kuala Lumpur's haunted house before it disappears forever.
Kita akan masuk dalam 2 jam. Pertama kita buat kajian di lorong. Lepas tu di sel 111 yang dikatakan sangat keras.
Abdullah and his team will leave nothing to chance and have brought all kinds of high-tech ghost monitoring equipment.
Semua pengkaji paranormal seluruh dunia ada beberapa peralatan utama untuk mengkaji paranormal. Yang pertama, video kamera. Yang kedua, kamera. Sebaik-baiknya digital. Ketiga, IR thermometer, infrared, iaitu merakam suhu. Keempat, EMF. Kelima, sensor.
A large mirror is also essential because some spirits only manifest as reflections. Abdullah begins by leading his team into the long central block of the old jail, the trunk of the spread-eagled man. Here his assistant, Siti, will be left to monitor any spooky happenings. Candles are set along the walls to register any atmospheric disturbances that might suggest a ghostly presence. A video camera will record anything out of the ordinary. Abdullah leads the rest of his team to cell 111, chosen tonight because some Chinese believe that 111 symbolizes the 3 joss sticks that are lit for the dead. The ominous reputation of cell 111 may be deserved. A warder once committed suicide in here. Abdullah sets up a camera and the spirit mirror and leaves another fearless assistant to wait for results. Abdullah is reminded that during the war the Japanese beheaded British prisoners of war inside Pudu. Perhaps their headless spirits will appear tonight, or perhaps not.
Tadi kamera apa masalah?
Tak tahulah, bateri semua penuh tapi dia terpadam dan sebelum terpadam tu dia berbunyi dululah.
Abdullah's last stakeout will be on Pudu's death row. Over the years, hundreds of men have waited here for their last appointment with Pudu's hangman. The paranormal team is fascinated by the last gruesome moments of one female communist in the 1950s. Her death inspired one of the enduring ghost stories of Pudu. Sentenced to be hanged, she had tried to commit suicide by cutting her throat, but failed. Then the hangman came calling. The force of the drop wrenched off her head. Many have cited her headless ghost among the pantheon of spirits and specters that allegedly haunt Pudu. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Abdullah and his team decide to leave Pudu and return to the world of the living. It would seem at first that he has failed in his quest, but then Abdullah begins examining the video footage from the main block. Behind his assistant's back, the candles can be clearly seen to quiver, as if some sort of presence was passing by. Abdullah is convinced that something supernatural disturbed those candles. Most people will need much more convincing evidence. Whatever the truth about Pudu's supernatural inmates, one thing is for sure: the prison remains a haunting presence in modern Kuala Lumpur. Although partly demolished, Pudu bitterly divides opinion. It would seem that a city that so fervently embraces the future is not quite ready to forget this symbol of its past. Today, Pudu Jail stands derelict and empty in downtown Kuala Lumpur, a brooding relic of the past, surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers. The old prison has some surprising admirers. 20 years ago, on a hot afternoon in July 1989, Tanah Lek left Pudu Jail for the last time, a free man. During his years inside, he had often wished that Pudu would crumble to dust. But today, he is supporting a campaign to preserve the prison as a monument to redemption, including his own.
俾我深刻㗎，即係呢個係我失去咗光陰咁多年，亦都俾我受苦咗咁多年，亦都俾我做人啊，唔出到嚟，點樣去做為一個人？
The old Victorian idea behind Pudu Prison was not just to punish, but to make its inmates better men. And that is what Governor Dato Ibrahim struggled to do, sometimes using unconventional methods, like mural painting.
When I visited Penang prison, I saw this mural painting being done inside one of the workshop wall there. So I think it's a good painting. So I asked who is the painter. He said one prisoner. He used only his fingers to paint all this. His fingers, so I was surprised.
For a year, Kong Yun Chong labored on his mural, painted along 394 meters of the prison's exterior walls. Even when he was released, Kong returned to Pudu to complete his masterwork as a free man. Kong and his team used up more than 2,000 liters of paint to create an astonishing work of art. The mural made Pudu Prison unique.
But he was happy and he finished the whole job for me. So I thank him very much for that.
Badly decayed today, this unique work of art was accepted by the Guinness Book of Records as the longest mural in the world. For many, Kong's work is a powerful symbol of man's capacity for rehabilitation.
Well, when I think about Pudu Jail, I think the first thing that comes to mind has always been the mural. I think it's been part of our visual landscape in KL for 30 years, and so at one time it was really very vibrant. It was very vivid because the whole mural was intact. It was this amazing landscape of almost a fantasy.
I think the people who pass by will looking at them painting at that time will also just realize that they're humans too. Like everyone has talent, everyone has a purpose, and that way that understanding is developed. They understand it better.
The mural is fast becoming history. It's fading and peeling. The rest of the prison too is crumbling. Journalist Zan Azli has closely followed the story of Pudu's slow decay.
Don't demolish the jail, it's like our heritage and things like that. And they kind of stopped the construction workers, and the construction workers wanted to continue, but they couldn't because everybody was standing there. And it's like the construction workers were like, they're trying to get everybody away, but nobody wanted to get down. They were just hanging around, some were taking pictures. A lot of people were taking bricks home as souvenirs. Even I took one of the bricks home.
Zan passionately believes that Pudu should be preserved as a unique city landmark.
For me, for example, Pudu Jail is older than me. Ever since I was born, Pudu Jail was already there. I don't even remember when I realized that the existence of Pudu Jail is just there, So yeah, it's a part of everybody's lives. So when you talk about demolishing it, of course, we feel sentimental, we feel a little bit emotional.
But the problem is that no one knows precisely what to do with this relic. After being closed in 1999, the prison was briefly a museum. Few bothered to visit.
Well, it's a reminder, It's a reminder of the good or the bad that we have in the country,
But money usually speaks louder than sentiment. Situated close to the center of Kuala Lumpur's affluent Golden Triangle, the old prison stands on prime real estate, ripe for development. The site has already been earmarked for the Bukit Bintang city center, estimated to cost $1.6 billion.
I read a lot of the stories in the internet saying that Pudu Jail is haunted, the land is haunted, everything is haunted there, you see, so it will not be an economic value or something. Even if you build high-rise buildings, the ghost will be up there, you see. So don't buy the condominium there, don't buy the shopping complex there, because the ghosts are all over. I don't think so.
In June 2010, contractors moved in to start demolition, and most of the famous Pudu mural was torn down. It seems that complete destruction is inevitable, but some campaigners have suggested an ingenious compromise.
I feel that the front wall, about say 10 meters or 20 meters on each side of the main gate tower block should be preserved with the tower block.
If that happens, the developers can have their lucrative land, and Kuala Lumpur can still retain a potent symbol of its rich history. This was once the gate to hell, but sometimes the start of a new life.
都幫過好多人噶嘛，啱冇先？酸甜苦辣啊，屋企啊，悲歡離合啊，好多事情發生喺入邊噶嘛。有啲應該寫喺入邊，有啲同冤枉寫喺入邊，唔應該拆嘅。
For many, the monetary value of the land occupied by this forbidding old prison can never exceed its historical significance. But after 115 years, Pudu Jail is on death row. The executioner awaits. It is unlikely to be pardoned. No one regrets that Pudu Jail has been closed forever. But the people of Kuala Lumpur may, in time, come to miss its strange and haunting power and regret its passing.